SD Local 6, your breaking news and weather authority. This is Local 6 at 5.
Devastation and destruction across eastern Kentucky today as officials continue to look for survivors from this week's record flooding. 16 are now confirmed dead. 6 of them are children. And Governor Andy Beshear says that number is likely to climb a lot higher. More than 24 employees of Appalachian Regional Healthcare, the largest health service in eastern Kentucky, are still unaccounted for. And many more are missing. In this video here, search and rescue teams backed by the National Guard are using boats and continuing to look for people in Jackson, Kentucky. These floods have wiped out entire communities. More than 300 people are in shelters with about 24,000 without power. President Biden says he spoke with Governor Beshear and is providing federal assistance. This afternoon, the governor toured those cities and towns impacted and said he's never seen anything like this.
Hundreds of homes, their ball fields, their parks, businesses, under more water than I think any of us have ever seen in that area. Absolutely impassable in numerous spots.
The flooding has totally annihilated the infrastructure. Water swept vehicles into piles, crushed runaway equipment and debris against bridges, and swamped homes and businesses. Mudslides have left many people marooned and without power and made rescues more difficult. A state of emergency has been declared in at least 14 counties and 3 cities. Many areas are without cell service. And it's not over yet. Another 1 to 3 inches of rain is expected to fall on that region throughout today. People across the state are stepping up and helping out eastern Kentucky. 6 Mayfield Fire Department personnel headed to eastern Kentucky this morning. The state has created a donation fund for recovery efforts. You can donate to that fund by going to WPSDlocal6.com and clicking on this story. Another group is collecting donations as well. A local veterans organization called US Vet Connect collected donations at the Children's Art Center in Benton. They've collected food, toiletries, all kinds of donations, and they're sending them over to eastern Kentucky. What he says they need the most, though, is water.
These people do not have running water of any type. There is no drinking water. There's no water to clean with. There's no water to bathe your kids with. There's nothing. There's nothing in a disaster of any type that makes people feel more secure and things that are going to be okay is in water. Something to drink, something to eat. The main thing that the governor has called for is water.
All the donations will be distributed by the VFW in Hazard, Kentucky. But Vet Connect still needs volunteers, and anyone can help.
Now, your weather authority first forecast.
As expected, it's actually going to turn out to be a pretty decent Friday evening with some partial clearing out there. We still have some clouds, though, across Missouri, Tennessee, and West Kentucky. The general theme for this evening is a north to south.
We're going to move forward right here, pertaining to our local weather. It's supposed to get back hot again later this coming week. Let's go forward. Gun violence, Ukraine, local court procedures, the head of sheriff to retire, all these things in western Kentucky. Let's continue on. The weather again of the flooding. Let's continue on. Here's another.
Las Vegas overnight, a flash flood warning and severe thunderstorm warning were issued for the Las Vegas Valley this morning. More than an inch of rain fell in several areas. The storm also produced wind gusts nearing 70 miles per hour. And here's Missouri, where there was heavy flooding yesterday. Drivers had to be rescued from their vehicles as many were submerged. Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe signed an executive order declaring a state of emergency. Scientists say the human-caused climate crisis is worsening extreme weather around the globe. Warmer air holds more water, which means more dangerous flooding, according to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
All right, not too bad out there tonight.
Okay, let's go forward some more here. This is our local weather. A lot of commercials. A lot of commercials. Oh.
Urgent rescues in both.
Let's back up a little bit. Right there. All right.
Lester Holt.
Mr. Holt.
Good evening from Houston, where I'm on assignment working on a story for a future broadcast. But our top story tonight, the flooding catastrophe in Kentucky, where officials say at least 19 people have died, including children, with the toll expected to climb. Authorities are not even sure how many people are still missing, with fresh concern about more life-threatening flash floods this weekend. Urgent rescues in boats and from helicopters continue, with crews saving hundreds already. The governor telling me on Thursday it's by far the worst flooding disaster in his lifetime. 6 more inches of rain are expected in parts of the already devastated region. Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and West Virginia also in the storm zone. All of it accentuating a climate crisis that is causing more intense and frequent severe weather emergencies around the world. We have it all covered tonight, beginning with Maggie Vespa in hard-hit Kentucky.
In the heart of Appalachia, hundreds of rescues and harrowing loss. Tonight, at least 19 people now confirmed dead in this week's sweeping flash floods. Kentucky's governor says 6 victims are children.
There's still a lot of people out there, still a lot of people unaccounted for. We're going to do our best to find them all.
In the town of Dwarf, crews with cadaver dogs search for bodies. The local sheriff, his own family, among the dead.
The first confirmed victim that we identified was my great aunt, my grandfather's sister. So the first notification that I made was to my mother.
Nell Howard was 82. How do you deal with that?
I sat down in my hallway last night about 12:30 and I cried for an hour.
Hours away in Beaver Dam, Shelley Wilson waits in agony for news on her dad.
I don't know if he's out there suffering somewhere and needing help.
Dennis Stacy is 72 and one of countless missing.
I just wish they would, either find him or his body would be located. Unfortunately, it's just the not knowing and the fact that he's missing. It's just excruciating.
Kentucky's governor with the head of FEMA today touring the devastation from above.
Hundreds of homes, their ball fields, their parks, businesses, under more water than I think any of us have ever seen in that area. Absolutely impassable and numerous.
President Biden declaring the area a disaster zone, vowing federal aid, but residents fear it won't come fast enough.
Never in my life would have seen it go up that fast.
Dave and Lisa Harris hid in their Garrett home's second floor as their first floor flooded. That's video of their neighborhood Thursday. Fast forward 24 hours, their garage is filled with mud as their family photos are drying out. One of many picking up the pieces in a community forever changed.
And Maggie, we see the rain still falling there. So many people missing. This is an urgent effort. I hear volunteers are now joining the search.
Yeah, Lester, exactly. With close to 300 rescues reported thus far, first responders here are just inundated with missing persons reports. So volunteers are now showing up here with their own boats, their own four-wheelers, their own drones to search for the missing and recover the dead. Lester?
All right, Maggie Vespa tonight. Thank you. It has been a volatile week of climate extremes across the entire country. It began with the biggest fire of the year in California near Yosemite and accelerated from there. Ann Thompson tonight on how climate change is unfolding in real time.
It has been a most unusual week. Wildfires threatening Yosemite, scorching heat baking the Pacific Northwest, biblical rains and floods in the nation's midsection. All the hallmarks of climate change.
This is exactly the fingerprint, the signature that we would expect with global warming due to the increase in greenhouse gases from human activities.
But even climate scientists are surprised by the intensity.
Breaking these temperature records, for example, by so far several degrees, goes beyond what we expected at this point.
The Earth has warmed almost 2 degrees since 1880, with most of the warming happening since 1975. Warmer air can hold more moisture and so produce more rain.
Does climate change create an environment that makes rainfall more intense?
Climate change creates an environment that's supercharged as rainstorms. And that means when conditions are right, we can get these catastrophic rain events, several inches per hour.
This week, Kentucky endured deadly 1-in-1,000-year rain and flood events.
I'm going to lose everything I have, for sure. But It's better than losing my life.
Precipitation events are now more frequent and intense across the country, with the biggest increases in the Northeast and Midwest. On Tuesday, St. Louis got more than twice as much rain in a single day as it does in an average month of July. Historic statistics in a mind-boggling week, showing us the future is now. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
The Biden administration.
I want to back this up. I got some things I want to weigh in on pertaining to all this that's going to probably sound
from human activities.
But even climate scientists are surprised by the intensity.
Breaking these temperature records, for example, by so far several degrees, goes beyond what we expected at this point.
The Earth is warm.
That's probably going to baffle people's minds whenever I get through saying what I need to say or what I'm led to say in regards to all this. First of all, it's very, very highly unusual for a state such as Kentucky to have two presidential emergency decrees given to it within a year's time pertaining to the tornado that dropped out of the sky about 2 weeks before before Christmas of this last year. That it's very unusual to see a state having two extreme major weather events within a year's time. Now they're going back to 1880 because that's basically whenever they first started analyzing this situation. And of course, as we become more high-tech pertaining to space technology and internet and NASA and etc., we started keeping up with these extreme events. But as you see right there, it says most of the warming, okay, has in fact happened in and since 1995. That's where they have balanced it out at. I have balanced it out at towards where the weather has went through its extreme weather pattern changes to 1983. And you might be saying, okay, you're only saying 1983 because that's whenever the two hands come out of heaven, and that's whenever God interceded in your life, and that's whenever you should have died, but you didn't. Well, that's only part of it. If you look at the records, Lake Mead, out west, and other lake pool reservoirs that supply water for the lives of people have bottomed out and hasn't been on a level scale since 1983. Since 1983, it has went off the charts in regards towards the heat, in regards towards now starting to see super sales that whenever they do release whatever they're going to do, we're seeing these extreme weather patterns now that are being crucial on this side of the earth. If you'll go to Google, you got the equator that basically runs right up through here, okay, and that's the center of the earth towards longitude and latitude. If you'll go to Google and Google everywhere where they're having shortages of water pertaining to drought, you will not just see them over here in this hemisphere, but if you turn the planet, the globe over, you also see them over in areas such as Spain, Italy, Germany, England, other places over there that are experiencing the same thing. They're experiencing water elimination from their water resources that is a phenomenon in and of itself, because it's one thing if you have a drought, let's say in South America. It's one thing if you have a drought like the Great Dust Bowl that hit out in Oklahoma. It's one thing for different areas of the planet to be affected by the weather. Now those areas have spread and abroad to the degree that a few years ago we seen Australia basically burning completely up. We seen fires and hot temperatures like we've never seen before. This year, over in England and Spain and over in the areas that I just got through talking about, Germany, which is right over in that area basically where Ukraine is. Ukraine is basically to where our line in Tennessee is right here. You got to go about 500 miles up to go over into where the Ukraine is over here. All right. So we're having these extreme weather events that are now intensifying to the level that now we're actually seeing them. We can tangibly feel them, hear them, see them, and we know that these occurrences are happening. There's no denial that these occurrences are super exceeding, and they're broadening, they're getting bigger, they're affecting more areas other than just a little area like in Oklahoma during the 1933 Dust Bowl. Now it's affecting the whole broad area, not only in this side of the earth, but on the other side of the earth too as well. Now, scientists put all their emphasis upon the greenhouse effect, where we have this protected shield around the earth, okay? And that protected shield has eliminated or evaporated itself or been torn down or destroyed. That used to be like 12, 15 miles thick, that now is only 5 miles thick. Now it's only 5 miles thick. During the time whenever the earth basically shut down pertaining to the COVID, there was all kinds of indications to where the ozone started building itself back up again. It started getting thicker. It started recuperating. It started recovering. Why did it start recovering? Because we wasn't using as many fossil fuels. The airplane industry basically shut down. The pandemic was raging over in not only China, but in other parts of the world too as well. And basically everybody had to come to a screeching halt for a while until we finally figured out how that we was going to manage this incredible pandemic that had hit the world in a time like we have never seen before, because we have now technology that we can actually keep in chart with all the temperatures, either coming from the Pacific or temperatures in the Atlantic, and we got other oceans and seas that we can now keep chart of. We have now temperatures in South America. We have temperatures up here. We have temperatures up in Canada, up in Alaska. Last year there was a plume. I'm going to call it a plume. I think they call it a dome. There was a plume that built right out here on west of America to the point that the droughting situation out there was just horrendous. A matter of fact, the heat actually went up into parts of Canada like they had never ever experienced before. And whenever the temperatures get that hot, I mean that hot in areas that have never seen temperatures that hot before, you're dealing with people that don't have air conditioning. It's not but like 2% of the people over in England and Germany and up in that part of the area, pretty close to Ukraine, within 1,000 miles of Ukraine, that don't have air conditioning. Only 2% has air conditioning. You know why? Because they have become accustomed to the cold weather, because this is where you have all the ice up here, okay? This is called the North Pole. Now, the North Pole is actually shrinking. The ice is deteriorating. Because the ice is deteriorating, now you have less cold. The cold is not as tremendous. The cold is not as forceful. The cold does not have near the energy content to it that it did whenever the ice went over the whole top of the globe, okay? As the ice is deteriorating, it becomes weaker. As the ice becomes weaker, the heat becomes stronger. So now you have a climax occurrence that's happening right now pertaining to the heat, pertaining to the ice that's melting, and also pertaining to the ozone. Now, there's another element that scientists have not yet pegged that is still, I guess, a general theory, but I don't think it's a theory because God has showed me that the oil was put into the earth, first of all, not by dinosaurs, but the oil was injected into the earth that was in between the mantle or the globe, which is in the very center of the earth, up until within about 5 to 10 miles of the earth's core, the outer core here, that oil was put there to eliminate the heat from expanding out from the core. As we're using up all the oil content, we're shrinking the oil content. Because I guarantee you, if you was to take all the oil that has been taken from the earth, going all the way back to either the late 1800s or the early 1900s, you could fill the Grand Canyon, which is up in this area right here. If anybody's ever went to the Grand Canyon, they know how tremendous big it is. It's like 2 miles wide and like a mile deep or something like that. And it goes for miles and miles and miles as far as the length. You could probably fill up the Grand Canyon all the way to the top, not to the top of the Hoover Dam, but all the way to the top, probably over a dozen times. Now I realize this old planet that we live on, it's a huge planet, isn't it? I mean, have you ever seen the like of all the space here? And of course, about 2/3 of it is all water. But it's salty water. It's not pure water. I believe that as we get further into this, because of the petroleum, you know, they just said a while ago that Exxon and Shell, they didn't receive profits in the last quarter in the millions, but in the billions. I think Exxon reported something like $16 billion of profit just within the past 3 months. Well, what has everybody went through in the past 3 months? We've seen the world get turned on again towards everybody now traveling again. We've seen the airlines at any given day. There's like 5,000 airplanes that's either coming into America or coming out of America. And that's just America, okay? That ain't counting all the airplanes that's coming in and out of here. That ain't counting all the airplanes that's coming in and out of here and over here on the other side of the earth, okay? So we've started using up oil. But they also jacked the prices up on the oil to the degree that instead of paying $2.50, or $3.50 for a gallon of petroleum oil at the pump. We were seeing prices as high as $5 over here, almost $6 in Illinois, and over $6 out in California. Well, those prices of petroleum wasn't just here. That was all over. That was all over the whole planet. That's why Exxon and Shell and other oil-producing industries pertaining to the petroleum industry has broke all-time record high profits. For America, Germany, England, China, Russia, whoever that's considered a superpower, for them to allow for their citizens to be treated this way goes beyond the pale of our ancestors raising up because of the taxation of tea that probably over half of them didn't even like at the time. What I'm talking about is the Revolutionary War. Our people said that we was not going to be treated this way and dominated this way by another group of people that was way over here on the other side of the world. They call it the pond. They call this the pond. This is the Atlantic pond. This is the Pacific pond. They wasn't going to have that because their lives was being dominated and dictated to in the degree of feeding the Empire of England. I think it was King George III that was in power at that time, that was dominating our society over here. Our people rose up. They rose up and they had a Revolutionary War. And guess what? In 1776, they took a few years. They declared us winners. We was victorious. Why was they victorious? Because what they was trying to do to us over here was wrong in what they was trying to do to us over here. Now, in today's society in the 21st century, if we don't have enough sense to figure out who is causing the extreme damages pertaining to our economy, then somebody needs to go back home and they need to go sit down and try to figure this all out. Because I promise you, the damage that has been done just within the quarter, just within the past few months, since everybody got back going again, and right now I'm talking about money, I ain't talking about the weather, but the damages that has been done is astronomical in some people's lives because they've had to go in and remodify loans. They've had to go in and restructure loans. Some people has gotten so far behind, they've got so many different penalties now pertaining to the financial industry that puts all kinds of penalties on you if you're a day late pertaining to your payment. That has absolutely torn people's lives apart. It has absolutely ruined people's lives. And I ain't talking about somebody that is worthless and somebody that don't want to work because they feel like society owes them a living. I'm talking about good, honest, working people that have put forth their best foot in trying to maintain a life status in not only America but all over the planet of these people that was a asset to society. Not just our society in America, but societies all over. Whenever you have so much greed, and that's exactly what it was nothing more than greed, in the way that they jacked the prices up. Whenever you have so much greed that does this, and for a group of people that we have hired to be our protectors, to be our brother's keeper, for them to sit idly by and let Exxon and Shell and all these other oil industries to do this, to me, it's asinizing. It's absolutely asinizing, especially whenever you start figuring out, well, just over the taxation of tea, we had a group of people that was willing to die that stood up in regards towards a revolution. Now I realize that now they have been caught. The professionals, the experts, scientists, weatherologists, they have been caught now basically with their pants down and not showing the truth about the charts in regards towards global warming up until just recently. Whenever Biden became president of America, that's whenever they started pushing very, very strongly for the Green New Deal. And fortunately, just within the past day or so, Biden has proposed, I think, about a $300 or $400 billion stimulus in regards towards helping various companies get lined up towards being able to make massive electrical cars and generating hybrid and also wind turbo and also solar, that they're generating now these plans towards getting this thing up and going, which that's fine. God bless them for doing it. And to be quite honest with you, I'm like Al Gore. Thank God that somebody's finally opened up their eyes and realizing that these harsh weather experiences that we're experiencing are happening more drastically, and they're coming closer together. It was Al Gore that lost his presidency pertaining to the Democrats that was trying humbly to help not just the American people but the world, because it was people like Al Gore 20 plus years ago that had done already spotted these massive changes in our atmosphere and throughout the planet. Once more, as of right now, it's still a theory, but I truly believe that the world, the globe, that they call down here in the very, very center of the earth that's full of molten lava, the core, I truly believe that what we're seeing is the risation of our planet in the heat. And as heat expands, okay, as heat expands, what does heat do? What does heat do whenever it expands? What does it cause? It causes things to evaporate. As our lakes, as our oceans are heating up, as our icebergs are melting, we're also developing other things that are being transmitted into our atmosphere pertaining to bugs, snakes, and diseases. What we're basically talking about here is taking a planet as big as the Earth is, and we're rearranging its ecosystem to the point that it used to have this amount of energy that was producing cold in comparison to the heat. Now the heat is expanding, okay? Now the ice is detracting, and now we're seeing weather events that's happening all over the world that is absolutely biblical, catastrophic. About a year ago, here in the state of Tennessee, if anybody knows anything about what happened in Middle Tennessee and Waverly, a little town called Waverly, Humphreys County, they had similar experiences towards what has went on in places like St. Louis and Kentucky, that what we've recently seen. Now, there was another climatic event that happened in New York that flooded the subway system back about 2 years ago. I think they blamed it on some storm, put a name on it, but still, we're seeing intense events that are increasing in not only intensity, but increasing in the amount of times that they come. What does the Bible say? The Bible says this. It's very clear that in the last days, flee into the mountains. How come Christ, foreseen over 2,000 years ago, which was basically God incarnate, carnal. He was God's Son in one category, but in another category, Jesus said, "For if you've seen me, you've seen the Father." Okay? How come this individual knew that these harsh events was going to bombard the planet in the last days to the degree of telling everybody to flee into the mountains? Jesus also said that we would see signs up in the heavens and signs upon the earth, such as mankind has never ever seen before, in regards towards these extreme weather, biblical, Bible, catastrophic fulfillments. If people does not get in tune with the reality that we're in right now, I'm just afraid that a great deal of people are not going to make it, just like the 20 plus lives that was affected just recently within the past 48 hours up in Kentucky, just like the 20 lives that was taken from us in Humphreys County about a year ago in Waverly, Tennessee, and just like the extreme weather events pertaining to fires, or I think up in Germany and England and up in that Spain and up in that part of the area north of Africa, they had like over 1,000 people to die because of heat exhaustion. People having heat strokes. Once more, only 2% of the people up in that area has air conditioning. Well, whenever you bring in all that heat and you're old or you're weak because you're sick, your body is not going to be able to handle the transition from being normal, or what you consider normal, to now getting over 100 degrees, because Germany and England and all those other areas that I'm talking about has broke all-time highs. Just like us seeing over 100-degree temperatures that are breaking records, that scientists is just now becoming aware of, that, oh my God, this thing is really happening. Yes, it's happening. Al Gore seen it 20 plus years ago, and I put a fingerprint on it since 1983, whenever those two hands miraculously come out of heaven, that I felt the fingers wrap around both of my wrists that was cold in feel. Very, very ice deathly cold. Immediately, the Spirit of God entered into my body as the asphalt hit the back of my back and the back of my head. That probably should have cracked my skull, because you're talking about a vehicle that went up into the air, give or take about 6 or 8 feet, and then now it's heading straight down, and I'm up underneath this automobile. Not only should it have cracked my skull or done damage to my back in that sense, but it didn't. But also, we're talking about metal that I visually seen wrap around my body like tinfoil, that is 100% against all ethical and moral and any other type of rules or regulations that you can think of. In other words, it's scientifically impossible for flesh and blood, skin, hair, bone to be stronger than metal, especially the metal in the upper part of the fuselage on the automobile that has high strength metal. It ain't just regular metal like flexible tin canning metal, but your fuselage is made to the point that if your vehicle ever rolls over, that the automobile has the fuselage above you with your A pillar, B pillar, and C pillars. They have to be strong enough to withhold the gravity and the weight of the automobile. That way, if the automobile does get involved in an accident to the degree that it turns over, it won't collapse up onto itself. So we're talking about metal, okay, that is basically as strong, if not stronger, than what the metal is on a full-fledged frame vehicle like a truck. This high-grade, high-strength metal is designed to where it won't collapse. It's designed to where it will take a great deal of pressure before it does start bending or collapsing, because that is the design from the safety manufacturer that they have to produce in any automobile to be able to do that. Don't matter if it's a car or truck. I've seen this metal bending around my body, around my abdomen area. In addition to the pressure that it put up onto my body, to the point that it bursted my spleen inside my stomach, up and down my spinal cord, and I had to have 9 units of blood transfused into my body, and they had to cut me open and remove my spleen and then poke all my intestines back into my stomach, and consequently, instead of sewing me up, they actually took big wide staples about an inch wide and stapled me up. And of course, the two pieces of skin drawing together is what hopefully will be able to regraft itself to the point that the two pieces of skin become one. Once more, God had his hand upon me to the degree that I healed up okay, and to this day I still don't have no problems that I'm aware of. I do have a scar that basically starts basically about 4 inches below my belly button, that goes all the way up to the bottom part of my breast. That's where they had to open me up and get in there and see what was going on, because I had lost so much blood that whenever I wound up into the hospital, they couldn't find none of my veins because my veins had sucked up, and the only way for them to start pumping blood to me is they had to open up a surgical place just above my ankle and find the main vein going up into your leg and start pumping blood back up into me. So I knew in 1983 that a divine intervening miracle had taken place. At that time, I was not looking at the weather. At that time. Since then, I've had miraculous other events that's happened pertaining to supernatural events, as well as me coming in contact with one of the most evilest beings that has ever been produced or manufactured here upon to the planet, pertaining to Satan in the flesh. I met him and his 12 other disciples on 3 different occasions, the people that basically masterminded 9/11, that America has yet to fully adapt or accept in regards to these biblical Bible prophecies that are now fulfilling itself. I can foresee in the direction that the planet is going in the next few years, because of the intensity of all the magnitude of these storms, either being entirely too hot or entirely too cold, just like what happened down in Texas. I think it was last year, maybe the year before, whenever so many people froze to death because their system could not handle everybody putting heat into their homes that ordinarily they didn't have to have heat, because once more you're talking about a southern atmosphere versus a northern atmosphere, to the point that it shut down their grid system, and I don't know how many people actually died during that occurrence. And God only knows the factories that was going that had hot moles that now they shut down, and they had to go in and either destroy the whole mole or whatever, or dig all that stuff out, and it just caused a lot of complications for the people in Texas, because Texas is an independent grid system. For some reason, Texas don't want to be hooked up to the rest of the nation, and because of it, they're basically on their own if something like that occurs. That if their system won't handle it, they can't reach out and grab electricity from, let's say, Arkansas or Oklahoma or over in New Mexico, because they're independent. And why they want to be that way, I don't know. That's a completely different ideal and a different subject matter. But getting back to the weather, this is affecting not just us but the world, and it's something that now scientists are beginning to understand, that as the atmosphere does heat up above our heads, above the clouds, as the ozone layer is breaking down because of the carbon dioxide, the initial stuff that's coming out of our mufflers, and all the heat that we're generating pertaining to all the artificial heat with everything in general. Now they're beginning to understand the complications of what we're doing to Mother Earth, which once more is a stamp of verification of what Jesus taught. In the last days we would see signs in the heavens and signs upon the earth, that he declared them as being sorrows. And of course, if you look over into the book of Revelations, it says, woe be unto the inhabitants whenever you shall start to see these things start to occur in regards towards the opening of the seals, or the trumpets that are being revealed, are being opened. As we get further into this, these things are not going to improve. They're only going to get worse until we awaken on a global planet level. And yes, I'm talking about China right now and some of those other countries that was basically just like Donald Trump, a climate denier. Just like the boomers over here in America, they was climate deniers up until just recently, and there's only been a few of them that has grasped what is actually happening here. And I don't know if they just have so much pride, or if they're just so stuck in the ways that their grandfathers and their grandmothers believed in, that they just can't come about themselves in accepting the fact that global warming is real. Even though we have science that can prove, beginning in 1880, of how that the world has escalated in intensity towards the heat. We have not seen nothing yet in regards towards these super catastrophic events that are happening here in America and throughout the world. We have not seen nothing yet. I think it was like a week ago, somewhere over in India, where it flooded like, if I'm not mistaken, 20 million people got displaced. Just the other day, there was an earthquake in Afghanistan that registered 7.0. They haven't had that strong of an earthquake in a long, long time. You know, you keep in mind, you got the ring of fire that basically is known of a cracking, moving, under-shelf magnitude that is constantly shifting and moving, just like the oceans are constantly splashing one way or the other. And then you got the high tides, you got the low tides, then you got the moon that's basically like a magnet, okay, that will make the tides even higher, that's causing floodings in Miami and over in New York, okay? And if it's flooding there, don't you think it's flooding in other areas, like all these little islands down through here that's now devastated by the weather events, especially whenever the hurricanes come through I think it starts with a P. Anyways, they still have not recovered over what they're already going through. And you may be saying, well, what is the answer? What is the answer? Well, the answer is for us to wake up re-engineer our thinking pertaining to using up all these carbons towards what Biden has promoted in regards to the Green New Deal. And the answer is for people to quit living like Satan in the flesh, but yet now declaring that their Lord is Jesus Christ. The Lord is our Lord only if we allow for him to be our Lord. Okay? In that event of the Lord being the Lord in our lives, in our personal lives, we have to make dedications to the Lord. Whenever we are no longer fulfilling those dedications, then the Lord no longer has to fulfill his obligations to us. And you may be saying, well, what are those obligations? Well, he promised us that he would be with us even until the ends of the world. He promised us, spiritually speaking, that no man can pluck you from the Father's hand. He promised us that he would stick closer than a brother. Well, whenever you have a society that is no longer functioning under the same pretenses or the same laws that God designed those laws to be, in regards towards people allowing for Christ to actually be their Lord and not just be their Savior, then you're going to have the Heavenly Father lift his protection off of that society to the degree of basically throwing us to the wolves and saying, okay, if you're going to continue to bite the hand that's been feeding you pertaining to all the precious resources that I've provided for you, I'll allow for Satan to take part of those resources out of your life. And that's exactly what Satan has been doing. He has been coming down in great wrath, just as the Bible talks about, not just in shootings here in America, not just in drugs, not just in other horrible, horrible bad events, but also in nature. And you may be saying, well, couldn't God stop that? Couldn't God overrule that? Yes, he could, and he would, if we as a society would go back and do our works over again, just like it talks about in the first 3 chapters of Revelations. For he said that he has not found our works perfect yet. In the meantime, we're going to see these catastrophic events like happened up in Kentucky, like happened 10 months ago, or whenever it was, 7 months ago, 2 weeks before Christmas, pertaining to a tornado that stayed on the ground for 250 miles, which is very uncommon. We're going to see rainfall that come out of the middle Tennessee, about 17 inches of rain in a period of about 6 hours, that basically done the exact same thing to us as it did to middle and eastern Kentucky, up towards Jackson County or wherever it is, or a town called Jackson over there, pretty close to Pikeville, Kentucky. We're going to see major plumes or domes of heat that is going to cause massive problems in regards towards the weather, extreme weather that is basically going to shortchange our water reservoirs like it has out west. And it's not just out west. I promise you, you can Google it. You can Google it, and you can go and look for yourself of all the places that are drying up. Their water reservoirs are drying up, not just on this side of the planet, but also up here on this side of the planet. Their reservoirs of their fresh water is drying up. There's been extreme other weather patterns similar in other parts of the world on this side and the other side. And then if you go below the equator in places like Australia and other places like China and other places, you'll see where the weather is absolutely freaking out. And I characterize it the same as a infant or a child that's throwing a tantrum. It's throwing, whenever a child throws a tantrum, that child is throwing that tantrum because either something is bothering that child or the child wants something. Our atmosphere that we're living in, that we're heating up, and our planet that we're heating up is crying out to us, please do something, please do something. But we're not listening to the signs. Just as we would listen to a child crying and throwing a tantrum, I guarantee you that child that does that for a certain length of time in a room with a bunch of grown-ups in that room, eventually they're going to get up and they're going to do something with that child. They're going to find out, hey, what's bothering you? Are you teething? Are you hungry? Is your diaper wet? Why are you throwing this tantrum? What can I do to prevent from you throwing this tantrum? We're not looking at the planet in the same way as mothers and fathers do, parents, whenever they're raising up a child at a young age, in an infant stage, towards that child throwing a tantrum. And to me, I categorize the same thing as the world. It's throwing tantrums. This is the thing that Jesus talked about towards the great sorrows. And he said that these would be the signs, and that we would see great sorrows or signs such as mankind has never seen before, that's going to occur in the last days, indicating that we are living in the last days, that we're at the door, pertaining to him coming back, gathering up his elect, and persecuting those that deserve to be persecuted on a level like that they have never, ever imagined before, whenever God actually throws this great planet off into great tribulation. Right now, we're not in great tribulation. I mean, there's areas right now in Kentucky and flooded areas and heated areas throughout the planet that they think that they're going through some form of tribulation, in which, you know what, if you was going through the same thing, you'd be thinking the same thing. You know, if you was over in England and Spain and Germany and all those places over there north of Africa, and you seen over 1,000 people die because of heat exhaustion, you would think that you was in some sort of tribulation. Whenever your house and all your belongings and everything that you've ever thought of towards protecting in your whole entire life suddenly gets swept away over a flood, you're going to think that you're in tribulation. And at that time, you are going through a form of great tribulation. That's why the Bible said to pray that you're worthy to escape these things, or pray that you can endure these things that are going to be falling upon to the planet in the last days, indicating that they would be falling upon to the planet. Why did he say that they was going to be falling upon to the planet? Because of the way that Satan has tricked us. The demonic forces has blinded us, and we have created all these inventions, not realizing the consequences in inventing them. There's over, give or take, 7 to 8 billion people on the planet. Billion. The planet is so overpopulated right now, it's not even funny, pertaining to everybody that's driving automobiles and driving big trucks and flying airplanes and wanting to visit their uncle or their aunt, or they got property on some other continent that they want to go to, pertaining to the wealthy and the rich. There's so many people and so much activity going on the planet. We are now seeing the very opposite of what it was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, towards basically the world shutting down versus the world now recranking itself back up. In addition to us still draining thousands and thousands and hundreds and millions and trillions of barrels of oil out of the crust of the earth, that once more was not put there by dinosaurs as they originally thought. But as you're draining this crust of the protected shield from, let's say, from right here to right there inwardly, we're talking maybe, I don't know, 1,000 miles. Let's say there's 1,000 miles between here and here. And we're working on this area, 1,000 miles, and we're draining the oil resources out of it. They claim that they've replaced the oil as they're draining it with some other kind of fluid, but the fluid that they're replacing it with don't have the velocity that the oil does. If you'll notice, whenever they drain oil out of the ground where it first comes out, it's like molasses. It's thick, it's ooey, it's gooey, it's a substance in and of itself that was put there of the friction content of the earth constantly shifting and moving and breaking away, and you got this that drops, this that rises up, just like the tides that move in, the tides that move out. You got the moon that causes the high tide, the low tide. You got the flooding of the high tide. You know, all these things are factors that God put in place that is harmonious, and whenever you take those harmonious things out of place, then you have complications. You have consequences. And in those consequences, we're going to see death and destruction like we have never seen before until the world wakes up in realizing what we are actually doing to ourselves. Not only to the planet, but what we're actually doing to ourselves towards violating all of God's principles, towards murdering and raping and stealing and being dishonest. But then what we're actually doing to the Heavenly Father himself, towards God lifting his hand because he's tired of his hand being bitten again and again and again. In other words, if you're not going to appreciate the things that the Heavenly Father has given you, and you're no longer going to live according to the customs that he has required for us to live by, pertaining to the commandments and pertaining to the lifestyle of living a righteous lifestyle, whenever you're no longer going to live that way, that's whenever there's going to be major complications. And that's where we're at right now in the year 2022. We are dealing with complications on a global level that is catastrophic, that are only going to intensify and get worse if we don't take these measures serious. And that's about all that I can say in regards towards the planet Earth. And I know we have a lot of people out there that love the Earth. We got a lot of scientists. We got a lot of people out there, weatherologists. We got all kinds of people out there that are now starting to wake up and realize the very same thing that people like Al Gore and myself have been preaching and teaching for several years, that now you can look at the data. You can look at the footprint and say, this is where we was then, and this is where we are now. If we don't smarten up, my friends, this planet that we live on will become uninhabitable. And we won't have to worry about God coming back and destroying us and taking us out like the Bible talks about. The Bible says that if we don't wake up and realize these things, that God will come back and he'll destroy mankind because of mankind destroying the planet. It specifically says that in Revelations. It specifically says that. It don't tippy-toe around it, not one bit. It says that he will come back and kill those who are killing the planet. And he will prove that he is the one that rules the hearts and the minds of mankind. If people don't listen to teachers, preachers, prophets, scientists, other professional people that's trying to help them, if people don't listen to us, you are heading down a path of doom. Doom and gloom that you're going to leave to your children, that they're going to have to inherit, because of people like the boomers here in America was so dead set that they wasn't going to accept any scientific finding facts. Well, now the finding facts is now finding us, a lot of us, in our own back doors. Just like right here in this area in Northwest Tennessee, the agriculture community has suffered tremendously, especially with the corn, Now, it's come some rains in the past couple days here that may, it may, you know, cause some of the late corn to, I'm going to use the expression resurrect or recover. But still, their corn this year ain't going to be near a bumper crop like they've had in the past 3 years or a couple years because of the adequate rains. Some of the beans, they're probably going to suffer, but they'll probably recover. Now, the late beans, I don't know what the weather's going to do in this particular part of the country in the next 3 to 4 weeks. If it dries up again, if it gets extremely, extremely hot, extremely, extremely dry, the late beans will probably go through a suffering scenario similar like the corn went through. And the thing about our world, our little bitty planet that we live on today, whenever our agriculture communities that are now interlocked with each other on knowing what goes on in Africa, what goes on in South America, what goes on in England and Germany and other parts of the world, whenever their agriculture communities suffer, it will actually be a plus for us over here to the degree that it causes the prices to go up. And as long as you have good yields, you made a bumper crop. You made good money. It has actually reached the level sometimes because of the plenty of grain, to the point that whenever grain gets so cheap, $2 a bushel or $3, less than $3 a bushel for corn, it's almost worthless to go out there and combine it and wear out your combine just to be able to till it up or harvest it because of the prices that are so bad. So you have to ask yourself a question pertaining to the agriculture community: which is worse, for the prices to go up and you not get the yield, or for you to get the yield and not get the prices? Because one part of the planet affects the other part. Well, now we're seeing the same characteristics on the other side of the world like we do on this side of the world. So we can no longer have that balanced, harmonious effect pertaining to Wall Street and how that they're going to bring in the grain and how they're going to estimate this and that. And of course, whenever you have somebody like Poisonous Putin that has caused such of a disturbance in one particular area of the world, and I didn't realize that Ukraine supplies about 2/3 of all the grain. I didn't realize that a great deal of the fertilizer comes from Russia. Whenever you have somebody that's thrown in another entity to have to deal with, along with the weather, along with the heat, along with 8+ billion people on the planet, soon to be 9, I think, you have a recipe, you have a formula of a perfect storm towards it being catastrophic. In the next few months, in the next few years, and whenever I say few years, I'm looking at a 5-year goal here. If we do not drastically change our way of thinking by using up the fossil fuels, draining all the oil from the earth that I believe was put there for a heat shield, and also was put there to eliminate the friction barrier of these continents. It's constantly shifting. You got one side of the earth that moves, and the other side moves. And I mean, we used to think that the earth was one big rock, and it's far from being one big rock. A matter of fact, they're now proving that America alone has like three or four different platelets that separate different things from the other side of America, that is constantly either shifting one way or the other, or going up or going down. So basically, the planet is a live entity of itself, and it's what God put in place for mankind to live on. Whenever we as humans, Homo sapiens, are not smart enough to identify the problems that we're creating for ourselves, guess what? maybe we don't deserve to live on this experiment that God has placed us on. And to think that we're out exploring for new life in other solar systems, and we can't even protect or take care of the life that we're on pertaining to planet Earth? Does that really make any sense? What are we going to do? Contaminate their solar system in the Milky Way or wherever that we do find life? Are we going to contaminate their way of life too? The human consumption and what we're doing to each other and what we're doing to the Creator and what we're doing to the planet is all in tune towards that harmonious balance. And whenever you start taking things out of the harmonious balance, then you're going to start having frogs that's going to be developed with two heads. You're going to have massive snakes. You're going to have diseases, pandemics. You're going to have problems like you've never ever had to experience before. Because why? Because you have taken things out of its harmonial balances. In other words, you have taken something that was in one state, and now you're changing that state. You're changing the atmosphere. You're changing the laws of gravity towards how it was functioning and why it was functioning the way that it was functioning. We're going to watch this one last time, and in doing so, I hope that you pay close attention to what they're saying.
1975. Warmer air can hold more moisture and so produce more rain. Does climate change create an environment that makes rainfall more intense?
Climate change creates an environment that supercharges rainstorms. And that means when conditions are right, we can get these catastrophic rain events, several inches per hour.
This week, Kentucky endured deadly 1 in 1,000 year rain and flood events.
I'm going to lose everything I have, for sure. But it's better than losing my life.
Precipitation event.
Is it? Is it better than losing your life? Because I promise you this, a lot of people that goes through some of the stuff that they went through because of now having to struggle in the things that they used to be adapted to, now that they no longer have those things, they're probably thinking to themselves that they would actually have been better off dead. They would have been better off if the storm would have went ahead and swept them out. And I'm beginning to start looking at that in a different perspective. Just like Christ said to weep whenever they come into the world and rejoice whenever they leave. The lucky ones are probably those that's already went through their life experience transitional period of living on this life pertaining to the carnal flesh that we're living in versus being transformated into the spirit world, into the spirit life. I'm beginning to wonder if death isn't such of a bad thing after all. And I know whenever you say that, a lot of people, you know, they just cringe. Oh my God, the man's crazy. Well, I guarantee you, those same people that went through what they're just going through in the last 48 hours up in Kentucky, you go to them a year from now. You go to them from a year from now. Those that has went through so much devastation, and you ask them the honest question, are you glad that your life was spared? And of course everybody's going to say yes, everybody that cares about life. But at the same time, their life has been dramatically turned upside down to the degree that they start looking at life in a different perspective, such as I would have been better off if I would have went ahead and died. And I hate to say that because I know how the human Homo sapiens look at life, and life is a very, very precious thing. But there is and was a purpose that John the Revelator wrote the things that he wrote in the book of Revelations after, I believe it's the 6th or 7th trumpet. of the judgments of God that's going to be falling upon to the planet, that they literally cried for the rocks to fall upon to them, according to the book of Revelations, King James Version, and the rocks fell not. In other words, they wanted to die because of these dramatic weather events that was massively bombarding the planet because of the trumpets and the seals and all the other things that basically come in variations, that they'll literally want to die and can't. That will begin the 1,000-year millennium, during the time that there will be angels that will be preaching the gospel during that traumatic period of time on the planet Earth. And I know that a lot of people, even though they may be creative in their minds, and even though they may be artistical, they may be engineers, they may be architects, they may have businesses, I know that a lot of people cannot wrap their minds around how that God is going to do this. And I realize the subject matter that I've been preaching on for the past 30 plus years is a scary subject matter. But what that they have done to me over here in Northwest Tennessee and the surrounding areas, they have characterized me as me being the same as the subject matter that I've been preaching on or teaching on, towards thinking that I myself was this vicious animal, or that I myself was violent, or that I myself was going to cause all these turmoils and problems. In other words, they misjudged me. And now, 30 plus years later, we're seeing the extreme weather phenomenons that are climatically happening catastrophically all over the planet. And we have no one to blame but ourselves. And we have no one to blame other than those that was not willing to open their eyes and realize that people like Al Gore, and yes, some of the extreme preachers or teachers such as myself, was trying to help them and not hurt them. Just like whenever I was up in western Kentucky and I was telling them about a major electrical disturbances. Well, I guarantee you, they're saying that there's been electrical grids that's been damaged, that's going to take months, if not years, to finally build it all back up in that area that I think has affected about 25 or 30,000 people. And that's just from one event. That ain't counting the ice storm that hit a year and a half later after I told people that God had told me to tell them that there was electrical disturbances to come. That ain't counting the tornado that recently hit up in Mayfield, Kentucky, that caused massive electrical disturbances to come. And in my projections of looking at things that God has formigated in my heart and in my mind towards being able to reveal these things, even though it sounds like that I'm the bad news bearer, in which I guess in a way I am. But I also put out in 2005 to the 43rd president, George Jr. Bush, that a bloody road ahead was coming in 2005. This is the year 2022. So now what is passed? 17 years. Look at the statistics in America towards how many deaths pertaining to suicides, drug overdoses, gun violence, and all the other occurrences. Look at the statistics 17 years ago, whenever I was trying to warn the American people, give them an advisory of a bloody road ahead. Compare those statistics today in the past 2 years in comparison to what went on in 20 and 15, 16 and 17. 2003, 2004, and 2005, whenever I first initially gave out that warning or that advisory. Look at the difference between 2005 versus where we are now, 17 years later, and look at the statistics of all the deaths and how that they are occurring, and you know, it's going to blow your freaking mind. Because just within the past year, people's been dying left and right pertaining to COVID. I think there's been over 1 million people in America alone that's died of COVID. In the response of people dying with COVID, they lose hope. In the response of losing hope, they lose the value of life. As they lose the value of life, just like the people that has recently went through this horrible, horrible event, I guarantee you, 6 months to a year from now, the suicide rate in that particular area will drastically grow. The overdoses pertaining to the drug use will drastically grow. These are part of the attributes that come whenever something like this occurs to a community. I seen it firsthand whenever Katrina hit. Whenever Katrina hit down in lower part of Mississippi, I went down there and I stayed with them for approximately a year. The first 6 months was absolutely traumatic in the things that I was seeing, hearing, and experiencing on a hour-by-hour level. Not a day-by-day, not a week-by-week, not a month-by-month, but an hour-by-hour level. And whenever I first got there, it was nothing uncommon to hear ambulances sometimes over a dozen times a day just within a square block area, a 4 square block area. It was nothing uncommon to hear ambulances coming and picking people up that had committed suicide or tried to commit suicide on a day-to-day level. Of course, it didn't help none whenever the state Senate, Mississippi State Senate, allowed for their citizens to be raked over the coals by the insurance companies that raked them over the coals by only giving people partial insurance claims, only gave them like $4,000 for a nuisance settlement versus them thinking that they was going to be able to get a $200,000 or maybe more for their home. And now they're in their 50s or they're in their 60s. They basically got to the point that they're getting ready to live out their remaining rocking chair years in their golden days. And once something traumatic like this happens to a group of people, it's like, well, I'd be better off dead. I would have been better off if the storm would just went ahead and kill me. Because now I've been slandered. I've been violated. The very people that I thought that was going to be there in case something like this happened, they was prejudging the storm and using the content where you didn't have flood insurance, even though it was the 200-mile plus winds that raked up the 30-foot surge, the 30-foot tidal wave that caused the water damage. And to think that their Senate in Mississippi and our government allowed for that to happen, I promise you, one day there's going to be people in hell that are going to pay for what they didn't do that they should have done with Katrina. And there's been other insurance companies in other major events, including this one, that are going to try to backpedal, crawfish out of their responsibilities and their commitments. Because the odds of people having flood insurance in areas like that, of a 1,000-year flood, are going to be slim to none. Thank God that we do have a government that does have FEMA and does have Red Cross and does have organizations now set up after Katrina has hit to where they can go in and actually help displaced families get back on their feet if they don't do nothing but offer them money or offer them a FEMA trailer or whatever, because there's going to be so many lives that are going to be affected by this. And I'm just not talking about the Kentucky storm or the storm about 7 or 8 months ago pertaining to the storm that hit 2 weeks before Christmas, but I'm talking about all the other storms and all the other catastrophics. This is costing our insurance companies not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars a year that are only escalating and getting worse. You can also look at those statistics if you want to. The insurance companies that is basically bottomed out in how much that they can actually charge people for their insurance. If you charge them any more, you're going to bankrupt them. They're not going to be able to make the insurance payment, plus the house payment, plus the car payment, plus the utility payment, plus all the other obligations that they're obligated to. So it's reached a breaking point, and if we as a society don't wake up to these breaking points, it's going to be devastating in the next 5 years from now. That is going to be worse than what it is now. We have to become adapted to our environment that is changing on a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day level. It is time for a revival. It is time for an awakening. It is time for a movement of God to help us through these struggling, dark times that we have obviously brought upon to ourselves. And if we don't, it's only going to get dark.
Events are now more frequent and intense across the country, with the biggest increases in the Northeast and Midwest. On Tuesday, St. Louis got more than twice as much rain in a single day as it does in an average month of July. Historic statistics in a mind-boggling week, showing us the future is now. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
That'll be all for today. Thanks again for allowing for us to use this platform and trying to help people's lives pertaining to the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Thanks again for your prayers. Thanks again for your concerns. Thank you for sharing and caring in these same events that I have been talking about now for, I guess, over 30 minutes. In trying to awaken people and others like me, like Al Gore, that have been trying to tell you that this is real. This is really real. This is the reality that we're now living in. And it's not going to get better until we do something about it. Thanks again. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless the planet. And shalom. Father God, we know that we have made a great error for the past 30 plus years in what that we didn't do that we should have done. I believe now, Lord, that there's going to be people that are going to be able to come to the forefront in understanding the things that the founder of the Windmill Ministries have been trying to tell them about is now upon to us. The very habitat, the very atmosphere, the very environment that scientists had projected that may take place in 20
against BA5, a highly contagious
and 20 and
the country.
And 20 and 50, they thought that it was going to happen 25 years from now, or 30, is now upon us today. So please, Heavenly Father, we're asking, oh Lord, that you be with us, that you intervene, and that we will see a mighty revival, an awakening, not only here in America, but throughout the planet, to be able to save lives, save communities, save our planet in the degree towards us seeing these growing fears that have now inundated a great deal of society. We thank you, we praise you, and we glorify you in Jesus' name. and amen.